Jim and his family decided to do a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, to the place where Jesus lived, in honor of his mother-in-law's birthday. Jim and his mother-in-law didn't always get along, but she always wanted to visit, and so they planned the trip. Well, during the pilgrimage, she passed away unexpectedly. When the funeral director asked where the family would like her to be buried, Jim thought about it for a second. And then he told the funeral director, "We'll bury her back in the United States. I heard this story about a man, Jesus, who died here and was buried, and 3 days later he rose from the dead. I'm not taking that chance with my mother-in-law." I know, that's rough. That's a rough one. A little boy was afraid of the dark, and one night his mother told him to go out to the back porch and bring in her broom. The boy turned to his mother and said, "Mom, I don't want to go out there. It's dark." The mother smiled reassuredly at her son. "You don't have to be afraid of the dark, son," she explained. "Jesus is out there. He'll look after you and protect you." The little boy looked at his mother really hard and asked, "Are you sure he's out there?" "Yes, I'm sure. He's everywhere. And he's always ready to help you when you need him." The little boy thought about that for a minute, and then he went to the back door, he cracked it a little, and he spoke through the crack, "Jesus, if you're out there, would you please hand in the broom?" A long time ago, very soon, we'll recall the death of Jesus at Holy Week. But today we're confronted with a different death, the death of Lazarus. And we're being asked to think about how often we avoid this topic, the D word, death. We're being asked to ponder the question, Jesus, are you really out there in the dark? Are you with me? And I'd like to answer that with an image that indicates that Jesus is indeed out in the dark and that he is indeed with us. So a long time ago, there lived this little boy whose parents had died. He was taken in by an aunt and she raised him as her own child. Years later, after he had grown up and left the house, he received a letter from her. She had a terminal illness, and from the tone of her letter, he knew that she was afraid of death. This man whom she had loved and raised wrote her a letter in response, and in it he said this, "It is now 35 years since I, a little boy of 6, was left quite alone in the world. You sent me word that you would give me a home and be a mother to me. I never forgotten that day when I made the long journey 30 miles from my house to yours. I can still recall my disappointment when instead of coming for me yourself, you sent your servant Cesar, a stranger, to come and fetch me. I remember my tears and my anxiety as, perched high on the horse, clinging tightly to Cesar, I rode off to my new home. Night fell before we finished the journey, and it began to grow dark. And I became even more afraid. Do you think she'll go to bed before I get there? I asked Cesar anxiously. Oh no, he responded. She'll be sure to stay up for you. When we get out of these woods, you'll see the light shining in the window. We rode out into the clearing, and there you saw the light. I remember that you were waiting at the door, that you put your arms tightly around me, and you lifted me up, a tired, frightened little boy. You brought me down from my horse. You had a fire burning and a hot supper waiting. After supper, you took me to my new room. You heard me say my prayers, and then you sat with me until I fell asleep. You probably realize why I'm trying to recall this to your memory now, he wrote. Very soon, God is going to send for you and take you to your new home. I'm trying to tell you that you needn't be afraid of the summons or the strange journey or the dark messenger of death. God can be trusted, he wrote. God can be trusted to do as much for you as you did for me so many years ago. At the end of the road, you'll find love and a welcoming waiting. And you'll be safe in God's care. I'm going to watch and pray for you until you're out of sight. And I shall wait for the day when I make the same journey myself and find you waiting at the end of the road to greet you. My friends, notice the symbols. Caesar, the stranger, is death. The light at the end of the journey is Jesus. The house is the many rooms that God promises us. The supper is the heavenly banquet. And God is the loving aunt. Today's gospel reminds us that Jesus is always with us, even in the dark. We see this on full display in our gospel today. He raises Lazarus from the dead. Lazarus had been in the tomb for 4 days, and Jesus calls his name, orders him out, and he does. He comes out, alive. Death itself obeys Jesus, who is the Lord. The crowd must have been stupefied, wide-eyed, in disbelief and wonder. This man was dead. He was rotting in a tomb for 4 days, and now he lives. Martha and Mary must have been awestruck that they didn't know who to embrace first. Should they go to their brother or should they go to the Lord? And Lazarus, as soon as the burial cloths were removed, he no doubt gazed lovingly at Jesus' bright, shining eyes with the deepest love and the most determined, courageous loyalty that he had ever experienced. And in no coincidence, the church presents this scene to us towards the end of our Lenten journey. 2 weeks ago, Christ told the woman at the well that he was the Messiah. Last week, we heard of this man who was born blind, cured by Jesus, given sight, something that had never been done before. And now Jesus tops everything by raising Lazarus from the dead. Each time, Jesus ups the ante. He knows that he's about to suffer as part of God's plan to forgive us our sins, to experience tremendous humiliation, torture, and death. And as that moment draws near, he performs miracle after miracle, and he does so to bolster the faith of his followers, the faith that's going to be tested on Calvary, and the faith that's tested when we confront death and suffering. And he's going to bolster our faith too, so that we can continue to hope, so that we'll never forget that God is always with us, because he never gives up on us. And just in case you forget, just remember that there are things here in this church that remind us that God never gives up on us. Take, for example, the altar. It's solid, immovable, made of stone. Like God's love, immovable, faithful. The crucifix is front and center. It's a symbol of God's unlimited forgiveness. The tabernacle and the sanctuary lamp, they quietly signal the real presence of Jesus Christ in the Eucharist. That's the greatest proof of all that God will never give up on us and that he is always with us. Friends, the little boy's question, "Jesus, are you out there?" must have been Lazarus' question. And the good news is that he was, for Lazarus, he was there. The good news is that he's also here for us, for me and for you.